this works. Oh, there we go. And I have my notes. Awesome. Take a seat, Casey. Yeah.
But they're all over there. It feels like a
Yeah, I know.
disaster.
Should we move the chairs? Yeah. Yeah, this seems a little strange. Whatever to win, Casey. Great. All right, great. Recording going? We good? Sweet. Thank you all for coming. I'm very excited to be here on a paid corporate trip. That's what this is for. Sweet. With me, by the way, is Casey. She can introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Casey. I'm also a forward deployed engineer at Palantir. Zach and I were the same onboarding cohort, so that's how I got dragged in to do this. I was not part of a startup shell. I was Duke class of 2024. But yeah, I'm excited to.
She's a prospective sheller. Okay. Yes. Right now, I work for Palantir as a forward deployed software engineer. The talk isn't really about Palantir. It's more so about kind of things that I am cognizant about as I'm in a corporate setting. Like it seems a little strange that I'm here at Startup Shell talking about what I'm doing at a corporate company. Like we're in the S&P 500, right? We're a large corporation, but not everyone kind of has the, I'll just say like privilege to maybe like go and chase an idea after college. And I have a list of reasons why on the slides, which I think will be interesting to talk about. But that doesn't mean you give up, right? You don't just like end up in corporate, right? There are ways that you can level up and kind of like work on these like founder skills in a corporate setting. So that's sort of the framing of this talk. And for those who do not know me, because I don't know everyone here, here's a screenshot of my LinkedIn. I joined Shell in winter 2021 with a startup called Wavely. I did the traditional track of where you build an MVP during an internship, ship it, get burnt out, the CEO is asking for too many things, and then quit. After that, I went to Cranius, which was a med tech startup, trying to do direct delivery of medicine through like surgery in the brain. I was there for 2 years as like a software engineer, kind of climbed the ranks. It was in like a very high growth position, you know, like just because I was like part-time as a college student, I had AWS admin access, which is something I want to preach about doing today. I was at EY for just a summer, and then now I'm here at Palantir. So Palantir stock is doing really well. In fact, we just became part of the S&P 500 this month. And if you look at this graph, you can notice a pattern. This was my first day. And this is when we joined the S&P 500. So I don't know. You can see a little bit of a pattern. Okay, so just a quick overview on what we do. Palantir is a software company. We help the world's most important institutions understand and use their data to solve the problems they face. Fundamentally, our products enable organizations to integrate various complex and initially siloed data sources into a blah, blah, blah. This was the presentation they gave me. It was just like a template of like going over Palantir 101, but that's not really why I'm here today, nor is that what I want to talk about today. I'm not trying to get you to work at Palantir. There's a lot of Kool-Aid we do at Palantir, and you can definitely drink that Kool-Aid if you want to go work here, and I can definitely talk about people afterwards if that is something they want to do, but that's not what this talk is about. This is a talk on gamma rays. Gamma rays. What does that mean? If you take the metaphor of the Incredible Hulk is only incredible because he subjected himself to a deadly amount of gamma radiation. And whenever Bruce Banner is put in an environment of extreme stress, he transforms into something stronger and more powerful than he normally is. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Shyam Sankar, he's the CTO of Palantir, and he was the first forward deployed engineer. This is one of my favorite quotes from him. You need periodic radiation, not lifting a little bit more weight every day. In the short term, linear development predictably leads to linear results. And as we're all kind of on a path here where maybe we'll go into a startup, maybe we'll go into corporate, maybe we'll work for Amazon, you can kind of get into this trap where your growth is linear. You're going to get upgraded from software engineer 1 to 2 to 3, and you have this safety net. But now you're on a linear track. And I think a lot of people here are on an exponential track, and it's just something that we all want to be mindful of. So with that, I'm going to make you guys do some work. Pull out your QR code, and let's read this. It's a Substack from Sham on gamma rays. And let me set a timer. I feel like you should read it too. Okay, there's a minute left. Do we need it? No? Great. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of have that to frame what I was talking about. And moving into these slides, being at Palantir, I found myself in a place where like I was surrounded by these people who share like a bunch of qualities that I kind of value, and it was something that I found at Shell when I was here as well. And it had me thinking about the overlaps. We largely don't fit the model. I kind of thought about myself when I was here as a computer science student, as there's like a ton of people in this lecture hall I'm sitting in, just over there, like 400 or whatever. What is the thing that made me stand out? And I think it had a little bit to do with like my belonging here, right? That like we are outliers. We do the things that most others don't or can't for whatever reason. I think there's a calling to achieve something greater in the sense that like we have these ideas and we like blindly and almost unrationally go after them just because like we love to do it. We are asymmetric, right? That was a phrase that Sean was using a lot in that talk. We are really good at prompt engineering or like we are applying to Y Combinator and like trying to drop out, or we like get really good and really deep on certain skills rather than like trying to fit as a well-rounded person. And we thrive in gamma radiation. I think that's the most important quality, is that we don't try and seek, like we don't try and hide from it. We seek it out and we kind of like live on it. Trying to like build my side hustle while I have this midterm due tomorrow or whatever, and like figuring out how to prioritize that and like taking on a lot of pressure and responsibility for yourself. So that leads to the other question: if we're so great, why aren't we all founders? I don't think it's a skill problem, because like I think the people that we pick to be in Startup Shell are like incredibly skilled, probably like some of the most skilled people on campus. And I don't think it's ambition either. Like I don't think there's a lacking of ambition of the people in this room and the people we admit. Nor is it grit. Like we have people like Bobby who literally used to sleep here, right? Like the 3 a.m. club or all that stuff. Like it's not grit either. It's none of these. This is kind of my enumerated list on why we aren't all founders, right? And these are probably weaknesses that we all have. And like if you aren't able to be a founder right out of school like you want to be, these are probably some things that you want to work on. Personal runway is just like getting a job that pays you and saving up so that you have a couple months to like not have income. Or, let's see, professional networking is something that you can definitely build on and like reach out and find contacts in like a corporate situation if like that's the thing you're lacking on. If you're in the right environment, a lot of people here, I say index on building, which is like, I'm making this thing, it's cool, but it's not actually the thing that people want. In the right settings, you'll be able to learn how to do that better as well. Enterprise sales, like navigating corporate ladders. There's a bunch of stuff that we aren't great at that we're not gonna be able to do because we're students. Like we've never been out there in the world. That, these are things that we can get better at in our corporate setting, but you have to find the right place. Which is the bottom line is if you can't be a founder right out of school, go somewhere that you'll suck less. Let's see, I have some bullet points here. Yeah, we've seen those videos of people at like Google or Meta where they're like, this is a day in my life as a product manager. And it's like going through the whole day and you notice like they don't do any work in those videos. And like, don't get me wrong, those jobs are great. And especially if you want to like prioritize like leisure and like work-life balance and all that stuff. But my read on the room is like that's not what we're all chasing completely. And it's also like you get trapped in there, right? Because if you get your first job out of school is at Google, and you have these like lattes for you every day and like the meals, and you're in this like awesome office, wherever you go next, you're gonna probably feel depressed. It's like I peaked, I can't do anything better, and you're gonna get stuck. And so I would have like loved to chase an idea after school, but it just wasn't realistic for my personal situation. And I know there are probably people who are in Shell or who are at this talk or interested, and it's just not the same case. But I feel like I found the right place to help me level up on some of these gaps that I have. Again, I don't want to like, what do you say? I was gonna say a different word. I don't want to like heavily praise Palantir because again, it's just like it's a job at the end of the day, and like this isn't the only place you can do it. But like, I work with people every day who have been at this company longer than I've been alive, and like we're on the same level, and we like interact each day. I'm solving problems that are so central that Palantir will play, I'll just say generous amounts, or they'll pay Palantir generous amounts of money to solve. I'm the one who gets to solve those problems. I'm getting exposure to like navigate these complicated corporate hierarchies. Again, in a world where I'm trying to go after enterprise sales, I know how you have to ask the person to ask for the person to ask for the person. It's something that I don't think I could have picked up while I was at school. I'm dealing with data sets on the scales of trillions rather than like thousands. It's a huge difference in like how you have to go about things. And then I was in Flint, Michigan, boots on the ground with a customer. Like who would have thought I would have been there talking with like operational workers. And I'm going to Barcelona this Friday on a flight I booked just a couple days ago. Again, boots on the ground, just working with them. And I'm not saying that this is the only place that you can do it, right? But it just, you should seek places that give you opportunities to do that. And I'm not the only one at Palantir who feels like this was a good stepping stone. Oh, oops. This is just a graph of all of the companies. Most of these are Y Combinator who have sprung out from Palantir. So it's a pipeline. And I don't think it has to do with the credential. I mean, I'd be like naive to say that there isn't any credential with working with Palantir. There's a credential with working at most of these big tech companies. But I think it has to do that like we get exposure to gamma rays, right? We have like near full autonomy. No one checked through this slide deck before I gave it. They probably should have, but like we get full autonomy to do our things, which is, again, it's a blessing and a curse, right? You get exposure to things. Like I was working until midnight last night because like shit has to get done. And they entrust you to be the person to get that stuff done. And yeah, there's probably a lot of people who want to be part of Y Combinator. I did when I was in Scheller. And Y Combinator values people who win. Like they do whatever it takes. I remember hearing the story of Airbnb where they were like selling Obama O's as like a side hustle so that they could get like money to be able to like support their business. And that's just like winning. And it's not just a like something we value there, but they like make us win. It's like you have to do it. Otherwise, like you're not going to survive there. So you should find a place that like you have to win. And it teaches you that skill. And again, it doesn't have to be Palantir, but just be sure wherever you go that you get exposure to gamma rays. And if you want it to be at Palantir, you can scan this QR code. It is. Cool. That's all I have with the slides. Drop your resume there, and I think we'll just open to Q&A. Any questions you have? I didn't even talk about like what Palantir is or like what we do or the product. If people want to talk about that, and then I work in the commercial business, so with companies like United is public, and Wendy's is public. And then she works on the U.S. government side. So if anyone has questions about like U.S. government stuff, you can direct it to her.
Yeah, I also want to add on that like startup page. I think one of the things that's so great, kind of I think what you were getting at, is everyone is given the autonomy to build the thing that the customer needs, like from start to finish, like zero. And so, let's say you're slotting into a much bigger company, like you're working, let's say you're a software engineer, like you're working on a PR for something that like might get merged a few months from now if it passes like 7 different rungs of approval. And like that's what the day-to-day looks like for a lot of people in these tech jobs. And I've had friends that work there, and some people like it, but a lot of people don't really like it. And so here, it's kind of I'm working from there was nothing, and like 2 weeks later, I've searched on this thing, like worked really late every night, and now there's this thing that 800 people are using. And so it's very similar to like a startup vibe in that way, where you're creating these elements of this product from scratch, and you're given full autonomy over that workflow. So you have to make a lot of the same decisions, like, am I building something that will scale correctly? Like, when there's now hundreds of thousands of users instead of 800, like, will it work the same? Have I made this thing work correctly? And so I think that's a lot of the reason why, one, people trust people who work at companies like Palantir, because they know that they're able to engineer something both very rapidly and very robustly. And so you're given sort of a lot of respect in that regard, because you haven't just worked on one small bit of a product. And I think that that's a skill that's really important and not something you can necessarily learn without doing it yourself, but being given the ability to like make those mistakes and learn from them and really iterate in that way.
Yeah, and to add on top of that as well, I think in a place you're probably either going to be in the position where like you have to maybe talk to someone externally and figure out what needs to be done next and then communicate that to the people who will do it. Or you're on the receiving end of that where like someone is like, hey, we have these tickets that need to get put in and you got to work on them. You do that whole process end to end of like identifying what needs to be done, tracking how you can do it, doing it, getting feedback, and then like iterating on that. Like, and that's what you need as like a CTO or like a CEO, right? It is to be able to do it end to end and kind of work in that ambiguity.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna say something. I think another thing that's really important is the skill to know what people need, and that's something a lot of what you were saying. You all have the ability to build something very clearly. That's like why you're here. But finding the right market fit is like what's going to be the difference between just having a startup and having a startup that's like exploded to millions of users. And so I think finding a job where you can really work on that skill of perhaps, here's a user, they're asking for something, but in my head I know that that's not really what they're asking for. They're only asking for that because they can only see so far as the end of their nose. And in reality, like as an engineer, I know that they're asking for this third, much better thing that I'm going to then go build for them. And I think that is a really special skill that I think a lot of engineers at Palantir have that really kind of cues you into that like startup mindset where you can see kind of an opportunity that isn't being filled and can like think that step further and make that leap. So I think that's another skill that like what you were talking about that you can build at companies like this to then like when you see that next opportunity, like you're able to actually go after it. So.
Cool. Questions?
So I might be wrong about this, but from what I've read about like for deployed engineers,
Yep.
You guys are like working with like on top of like the like software platform like Foundry and whatnot.
Yep.
And like are you like tailoring it to specifically what the customer wants? Are you like building new stuff? I think like as like people in Shell, like we're very good at like building things, and I'm just curious like if you're working like mostly with like Spark and Python, SQL and whatnot, do you ever worry about like losing your edge of like being able to build something like from scratch as opposed to on top of like really powerful big-ass platform?
Yeah, and then just so it gets picked up by the mic, the question was like, you're doing a lot of building as a forward deployed engineer in Foundry. Do you worry that you're going to lose your ability to, I guess, build outside of Foundry, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm only 3 months in, so I feel like it would be hard to say that I'm losing that skill. Maybe if I'm like a year in and like I stop doing like side projects on the side, or if I like stop coding in like React or whatever, it could be an issue. It's maybe something to track, but I don't know. I think that you are like a programmer, not like a framework programmer. I think the ramp up between like if I had to go do a Rails project would be like, I've never done Rails, but could probably get pretty comfortable with it in like a couple weeks of just like dedicated effort. So, but not like a bad thought at all, and like something to be aware of.
Yeah, I would also say, and this is going to sound like just the Palantir pitch answer to this, but it's kind of, I think that you are given also, you're not kind of you're not only living your life in front of the product. Like if you, let's say you're using something and you're like, wow, this works really terribly, like I wish it would do this other thing. You, as a coder, like have the ability to go and work on product yourself. And so like, as he mentioned, like you can really go from all the way to this end, all the way to the user. I think that's why it's a really unique role. And so product contributions are sometimes really necessary, but also it's like if you are working on a project and they want some sort of integration that we don't have, that's like a really interesting technical thing. It's kind of on you to like make that happen and talk to the appropriate people in product and kind of work on that integration. Like a lot of things end up being very complex that are not necessarily like build this new element of the core product, if that makes sense. And you're able to go and do all that. So I would say that people do not necessarily complain about like lack of technical problems. They're there if you can find them, and you're given a lot of autonomy to like search for the problems that you want to solve. And like for instance, like take on a side project, and like maybe the client that you're working with doesn't have this certain problem, but you know that there's other people that are working on it, and that's something that you're really interested in. Like you're able to talk to those people and be like, yeah, join us, spend 50% of your time working on this. And so I think that's another thing, like finding a company that gives you the flexibility to prioritize the things that you want instead of just the things that are best for the bottom line is really important, because that gives you really like shape the future that you want coming out of that company, which is something that I really value, and like why I chose Palantir is because I wanted to be able to like work on the things that I wanted to. I'm really interested in like a lot of AI stuff, and like if I just go into a big company and don't get to work on any of that, like in 5 years, where have I gotten myself? Nowhere. So I think finding the ability to like hone those skills that you want without but yeah.
Yeah, Max.
I guess for both of you, on the government and the commercial side, as developers, what's your experience kind of working, I guess, either with kind of capture managers and like biz dev people? You mentioned kind of interfacing with that corporate ladder. If you're a kind of more customer facing, the people that are on the contract side of things, like working on the business development side, I would assume you kind of interface with them pretty closely to like help figure out how all of that goes down, especially on the government side. It's not normal for a government contractor to go out in the field and do things that aren't under the contract.
Yeah.
You said capture, which is funny.
I know. See, he knows.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not going for that role.
Yeah, I would say on both elements, there's a lot of, and I not to like repeat what I said earlier, but there's a lot of understanding places where like the government doesn't know what they need, basically. Sorry. But they have no idea like really what they need, and they're asking for something, and you have to kind of be like, this is definitely a problem for not even Palantir, like this thing that I'm going to build. Maybe you have a startup, maybe you have a small business, that like the government funds a lot of small business things as well. And so having the foresight to kind of communicate with a customer that doesn't know what they want is, I think, very important. And being able to build the thing that they're not going to ask for and kind of guide them in the right direction is a great skill to cultivate. And I think that's something that we're working on. Definitely working on a lot of like active outreach as well. You would be surprised, and I think this is a talk that Sean gives a lot for commercial, but it also obviously applies to government. You would be surprised how many legacy systems there are that absolutely do not work within like supply chain management, within a lot of manufacturing. Like so many people are just living on these legacy systems just because like that's what they've always known. And so I think having that and like having the energy to really want to go fix it, even if it's difficult, because people don't want to give up what's easy. There's just so many opportunities to go and like transform that. So I would say, sorry, I've gotten really inspirational all of a sudden, but I would say like don't lose that like spark and that desire to like go in and change things, because I think losing that is like when you start falling back into just like doing things as they've always done, and now you are a part of the problem. So
And like,
I hope that answered your question, but
just studio.umd.edu like still exists. Like I don't know when that was written, but probably in like early 2010s. Were you asking on the sales side of it or like post-contract side?
Well, I mean, kind of both. In commercial, I can imagine it's more cyclical, but for government, amendments are a lot harder to make once you have a contract. Or you get a subcontract that's like, let's add this to the contract. If you are kind of pushing, going to customers and making solutions that, for government contracts you might get, so like VA, you're bidding on that, that's the solution they're asking for. And solving a problem they're not asking for is like a bit tricky because it's kind of the whole and-or problem of we built this thing we know you want, but you don't know you want it. And it sounds like that's something you're looking to address, but as an engineer, like where do you sit in that process?
yeah, I think I would say like we work very closely with a lot of the sales team, and you're right, it's difficult. Like it's difficult to navigate the whole contract process, like how much we should be getting paid, like all that kind of stuff. And they're very good at what they do in that realm. But I think a lot of the way that we interact with that is the art of the possible, and kind of like working with them to maybe say, it doesn't seem like we can do that, but actually I can build that, and I can actually, and so like a lot of times the salespeople and people at the front of that like aren't aware of all that we can do, and so you're given the autonomy to kind of go above and beyond to like of what Foundry might be able to do. But yeah, so I think that I would say it's a little bit of a difficult process, and yes, you're right. Like there is a lot of sometimes you do what's in the contract, and then you kind of want to do this other thing, but you can't. So you have to kind of like add on a little option at the end or whatever. But I think that a lot of it is like changing hearts and minds, and so it's like once someone understands why the thing that you built is actually galvanizing, like with Mandaryl, it's like then the contracts come, because I think it's a lot of like people management, which again gets to what Zach was saying of like that is a definite skill of understanding who you have to win over and like why, so you're not wasting your energy on people that don't matter. And I think that a lot of like really successful founders have that ability, and so that's a big catalyst for like whatever you end up doing. I'm trying to make it startup theme. I'm doing a really good job.
I can talk on the commercial side, but I think you were asking about government. Yeah.
With so being like Palantir, like just corporate in general, like what's like unique about like being able to understand the certain class of users or just like an industry, like what's like your advantage there, like understanding needs?
What is Palantir's advantage to being able to understand like customer needs?
Yeah, like learn about the industry generally, like what people like, would want, like what.
I see. Gotta think about that. What is our advantage? Normally our unique advantage over competitors, which is weird. We don't have like traditional competitors. It's like you have competitors on an industry maybe, but we're just like very competitive on speed. If you want to do something and you need it to be built as fast as possible, like we're the people who can do it just because of like Foundry and how powerful it is, at least from like a commercial side. I know government side, we still move way faster than like traditional contractors can do. So it's really just that, like because we've done a lot of the work of like we have, if you look into Foundry and there's this thing called Workshop, which is basically just like, you don't have to worry about design systems or like styling a button or like rounding this or moving this in that place or like this should be a flex container. Like you don't have to worry about that. Like that's kind of like the solved problem. Really, you spend all the time getting the data into the system, and then from there, like the actual displaying of it is like 5%, 10% of it. So I guess the long-winded answer is we're competitive on speed. We do stuff fast.
Yeah, I can give another kind of Palantir schmitty answer. Sorry, suddenly I'm a recruiter. But I think that a lot of companies, the fault that they get into is they have this product and they're trying to fit the product into the user. If that makes sense, like they're like, you need this because we have this really good product and you must need it. And they try and find ways that like the user can use the product. We kind of flip that on its head. We start with the user and start with the problem, and then engineer the solution to that problem. So we end up sort of solving all their problems much better than they could have anticipated, like because you're starting with the user story. Does that make sense? And so that's where we beat out a lot of other people, is because they're not like changing, Microsoft Excel because a certain user like wants something. But like we are, we're gonna build something for you that's gonna work exactly in the way that you need it to, because we have like people who are gonna be on the ground, they're gonna be talking to you, and then also the ability to like build overnight. There's always these stories of people who like meet with users in the entire day, and then they kind of like build overnight, and then they roll it out the next day. And like that's the kind of vibe that we have, which I think is a very startup-y vibe, where it's like you're building something that's gonna ship out the next day, and you're getting feedback, and you're iterating on that cycle. So I think that's another advantage that we have, and why people sort of choose us over others.
Amanike?
You mentioned that you stayed outside of like 12 and 19. Is
Yes.
that because like maybe communication between teams are like slow, or is it just you're just continued stream of like output, and just took that long?
Yeah, funny question. I forgot. Have you worked on something? Like, have you tried to make a startup?
Yeah.
You have. So when you were like in that situation, right? Like, there's a million different things you could be doing, right? Like a lot of them are probably all in the direction of like what's valuable. It's just that situation. It's like there's so much that I got to do to get to where I want to be, and I was just mostly unblocked last night on where I needed to go. That was the reason why. Like really, I didn't need to. It's just they're paying for me to go to Barcelona, so I kind of have to put in a couple extra hours. What's up? That I can't say.
Yeah, I would say it's a lot of the hours are not any better in government. If anything, like a lot of them are maybe worse. Purely because like the mission of what you're doing is very important, and I think a lot of the people who work in Palantir on government are very bought into the fact that what they're doing is really improving the current state of things, and it gets very into like you're saving lives, like you're saving a lot of resources that are then going to be used towards something that's really impacting a lot of people, whether that's like disaster response or a lot of the healthcare implementations that we have are very obvious, like DoD ones. And so I think that on the government side, it's a lot of building something because it's of the utmost importance to a lot of the people in the U.S. that this gets solved as well and as quickly as possible. And so it's like you're putting a lot on yourself, and you're kind of holding yourself to a higher standard to like get this done because you are driven by that mission. Whereas I think for a lot of companies, like you're lacking a lot of that mission, so there's no reason to really work late because it's like this button will be this button tomorrow, like whether I
Yeah, and I've never worked like awfully late on something I wasn't interested in, right? Like I just imagine if I was like at school, and this was just like one of the stuff I was working on, like I would stay up late solving this problem. Like it was cool. It was exciting. Like I was learning. It's definitely not like the investment banker kind of thing where it's like I need this model, yesterday, and it's like dude, I don't want to spend my whole day in Excel. Like it's I'm not burnt out. It's Rajeep.
Yeah, so you talked about how kind of like your shellers and your founders are asymmetric people.
Yes.
So as you've been working in Palantir, I know it's only been 3 months. What are some practices that you've personally kept up to kind of keep that spirit of the founder alive while you've been working on all these awesome projects and contracts or whatever you've been doing?
Yeah, I think just I've reminded myself a lot that I'm doing like a lot of really client-facing stuff on an industry that I have no idea about, and it can get pretty frustrating, or you can get kind of flustered on it because like you're trying to explain what you understand is this concept or like how they represent their data, and they think you're the biggest idiot in the world, rightfully so, I guess. But you just kind of have to. I remind myself a lot that like it's a very fortunate position to be in, that you can be just like a complete utter idiot in front of these people, because like you're gonna learn so much about approaching something completely new that you don't know about, and like being successful in it. And I always kind of tie that back to like my longer term goals of like, this is something that like really is going to help me. I don't know if you have an answer for that.
I'm not a sheller, but I can speak on. I always thought that I would work at a startup coming out of school, and like it didn't really apply to any of the big tech firms. And this is one of the only ones that I felt like was like bigger, but really fulfilled that startup vibe for me. So I feel like I can speak on this. I think that 2 things: always following things that you're curious about, and like making sure that you're keeping that kind of itch scratched. So it's like if there's something that I see that I think should be better or I think should work differently, like I will flag it and kind of dive into it, and maybe I can be the one to make it better. I can have a side project that I'm working on, like as I was mentioning earlier. And I think that like following that instinct of like this thing is really cool, I need to make it better, is something you should always keep. So I think that's number 1, and I think number 2 is just always giving yourself a lot of responsibility and having trust in yourself that like failing often is the right mode. And so, I might be building out this entire thing by myself, like going in front of a customer and they're like, well, that was not what I wanted at all. And it's me from start to finish, and like I put myself out there and like maybe did this extra thing that they didn't want or they didn't like, which is like kind of a lame example, but it makes more sense when you are in it. And just like understanding that and like building that muscle, I think, is also really important. Like making sure that you're always doing something that's like a stretch instead of just like the 3 PRs that you've been assigned today, and like you're not learning anything there. So yeah, that's my answer.
A top-down product decision, how does that work in a big company? A top-down, do we really have those?
Well, does he mean like what I was saying, like if the user wants something and you build it?
I think he's talking more like,
Or like
can you ask him to specify if he's talking about like a customer top-down, like the customer wants something, or like Palantir leadership wants something?
oh, yeah, that's
So I guess like you could talk about AIP and how that's been implemented.
yeah.
We'll wait for him to respond.
Could you elaborate more on like sort of feeding information from a customer who only has an idea, but who as a software engineer have to convert it into a solution, kind of like bridging the gap between like your software engineers and a non-technical guy? How would like you talked about it, but I wanted to know more about it.
Yeah. Well,
Wait,
that's
can I speak for you? I did such a funny story on that. I was in a meeting in Detroit where we were talking with their IT people, and they were like, you guys can we can upload PDFs. I was like, what? Yeah, of course you can upload PDFs, but like people do get so stuck, and like they work with Power BI a lot, and you can't upload a PDF to Power BI. So I think this is something that we'll probably all experience when we're working with people who's been in industry for a while. I think regardless of where we're at, is like, yeah, they don't really get the possibilities of, I guess, just what you get so siloed in like what your day to day and like what your I guess kind of what your limitations are. That a lot of our job is unlocking. I think you said like the art of the possible, right? It's like a very Jobsian thing where people don't like they aren't asking for it, but they will want it. I think we get to do a lot of that, which is really cool. And you can give your answer.
Well, I was just gonna say that's the whole thing, and I think that's like Palantir hires forward deployed engineers who they can tell are going to be good at that, because it's I will say it's not easy. It's definitely a skill that we're 3 months in. Like I'm definitely learning as I go. Can't say I'm like perfect at it yet, but I think there's a couple of things. The first is that I think asking questions is in fact the most important thing that you can do, and then the thing that I've learned is that like my follow-up question is more important than anything, like what they say or my interpretation of it, because they could be saying something and like that's not actually what they mean. Quite frankly, that happens 4 times, and I would like to admit. And so really getting to the bottom of that, I think, is key, and really asking like big picture questions of like where are we going and getting to I think that it's very easy when someone gives you a problem to be like, yeah, I can fix that and I can do it really quickly, and you like give them this thing that they've asked for and you're like, wow, look at how great I've done, like I've done this thing for you, but that's like not actually what you need to be doing as an engineer. And so I think that this goes out to a lot of other problems. Like there's a lot of problems that you can fix maybe at a surface level, and you can do that quickly. You can get a lot of maybe some money, some like kudos, whatever from it. But like doing the actual deep dive and like really understanding why something is broken is a lot harder. That was kind of a fluky answer, but yeah, I think asking questions, and it is a skill that you have to learn and that you have to like be in there with the client. Like reading people, as silly as it sounds, is like a really important skill. And yeah.
Yeah, I think the short of that is try, fail, and then just try again, and you'll eventually move in the right direction. Because you'll do something that's like, wow, I didn't want this, but maybe it unlocks like something like, oh, but you can do that, and then you just kind of you move. If this is the path of progress, you jut along until you eventually make it that way.
Yeah, I would also say another like skill that all founders have, and that the reason all successful founders have, I should say, the reason why they're successful is that they're engineers who are able to, again, like very Steve Jobs-y, like explain why their engineering is actually going to change the world and like make people understand that. There's a lot of engineers who can like engineer very cool things and then don't have the ability to like broadcast why it's cool and like what they've done to people. And so the skill of a founder is like being able to do both, not just be a back-end person who can do hard things, not just be a front-end person who can like make speeches, but to be able to communicate like why the hard thing you've done is cool is I think a very important skill to like have and train that you can then use like when you want to start something of your own.
Yeah, it's the more important skill.
Yeah, the most perhaps.
Aiden.
So like, how does Palantir in terms of like growing as a engineer? So like, you guys are saying stuff like you meet with people from like your like clients and for one day you design it and then overnight you ship it the next day.
Yep.
And like you can go and ship it, but like what if your product or like the quality is just not great? It's like not the best qualification. How do you like? How can you learn from people who just are better engineers if you need to like do it?
Sorry, what was the last part of what you said? If you need to generate.
Like if you need to like how at Palantir are you able to like learn from better engineers if you just need to push out products that
I would almost say that I don't. Not in like there aren't really great engineers who like I could use as a resource and like try and learn from more. There definitely are. There's like a ton of super talented people, and then, like as a forward deployed software engineer, you can always move into product, like do more stuff closer to the product itself. And there are a lot of people who transition into being a developer rather than like a forward deployed software engineer. But like thinking in the context of like entrepreneurship and like wanting to be a founder, I think like my base skill set is good enough, and that's not what's going to limit me. Like it's not my ability to build a product that's going to limit me. My success, it's all this other stuff. It's like the human stuff and like the talking to the people and like decomping problems. And so I think I'm focusing my energy more towards that and not like towards being a better engineer.
Yeah, I would say my answer is that like you learn by failing, and like you aren't necessarily always like writing code and sending it up to your superior and being like, does this look good? Like, does this match what you think it should do? You build a thing and you test it, make sure that it works. You ship it out the next day and it doesn't work. There's a reason it doesn't work. It doesn't scale well. Some connection is broken. Like you're like, oh shoot, like I built that. Can you that. Like we've been here for 3 months. I can tell you I 100% like design things in chip code way differently than I did in my first week. Like because I've done things and they haven't worked and I learned from them. And I think you learn so much better from that than if I was to do something and someone would be like, well, this isn't very efficient. Like maybe you should do it this other way. Instead, it's like you're like, wow, this is actually taking forever. I need to go fix that. And so I think that is also maybe if that's what you were getting at with your question of like how do you kind of make sure that you're building robust things. I think the answer is that if you just kind of push yourself to do it. It's kind of a bad answer, but it is true.
Well, and you're on the hook if it goes wrong. Like you have to fix it.
You get paged because something is wrong, and like that's you that has to go in and figure out what you did.
And then someone will like email you from something you did 6 months ago, and it's like, hey, this doesn't work anymore, and then you have to go back and fix it. So that's the incentive. Like you got to do stuff right so that people don't write you angry emails like a year later.
Yes, definitely challenges you to build like robust solutions, which is not something I was good at. I was very good like you're in school when you do a problem like it works, right? And you never really think about like what are the downstream effects of this thing. So it's very like got 100, like it was the right answer. And now when you're building a product, and I'm sure all of you like add products and start something you're aware, it's like an entirely different process where not only is the right answer, but like is it the right answer in this circumstance? Does it scale this way? Like it's all those questions. Will it work for years from now? All that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that we're building a lot of that.
How drastically do you think your way of approaching things changed once you started talking to more customers?
It was like, how has my way of thinking changed as I've been like talking to customers? Ah, interesting. You have an answer?
How has my way of thinking changed as I've talked to more customers?
I guess like how do we decomp things?
Yeah. Well, we've only been here for 3 months, but I think that our
No, but I feel like
decomping skills.
there's been plenty of time to. I feel like I've changed
Yeah.
quite a bit in how I approach that.
Yeah, I think that this is, I don't want to repeat stuff that I've said before, but I think that a lot of decomping skills and kind of like predicting dependencies and like predicting what they want is something to grow in. And I think that like over the time, when I started, I was that person that I explained where I was like, they asked me something and I was like, oh, like I can do it, like I know I can do it. And then I was like, I'm being such a good, forward deployed engineer. And I realized that that's like not what it's about. And so I don't know that that was an answer that was really any more insightful than anything I've said previously, but I think like taking the time to really think end to end before you build something, and like you only get the ability to do that because you are given autonomy from end to end. Like you're not building one step of the pipeline, you're building the entire pipeline. And so like having the ability to look forward and like see beyond the thing you're building right now is important. Like it's not, this engineering team has built this thing, and then now it's not compatible with the thing this other engineering team has built. Now you have to like sit around in meetings and like figure out how to make it compatible. It's like you have to have the foresight to know it needs to be compatible with this thing that I'm supposed to be doing tomorrow or this next step in the process, and you build for that. And so then there you have this like solution that has worked. Is I think something that like is difficult and definitely takes time. I have to say I definitely like build things and I was like, well, that's not going to work because now I have to link it to this other thing. And you have to like go back, but you learn it. And I think now I'm so much better than I was earlier.
Yeah, I think my answer is like, if you're partnering with someone, like they have something you need or you something they need, people don't like to sit in meetings. Like they hate to have their time wasted. And I think when I first got there, I'd be like, hey, let's meet about this kind of data. And it's just like way too broad, and they get like a little frustrated that like you don't have a point, and it kind of seems like you're going into it without a plan. Is something I encountered pretty early on. So like it's, if you're going into a meeting with someone or like you're discussing something, go in with like an approach, like a plan of attack. You kind of want to lead the agenda, otherwise, like, because at the end of it, you need to get something out of it. And so like dictating the agenda and making sure that like you're moving in a direction where they're like helping you, which sounds stupid because like you're in a meeting with this person, shouldn't they? But like it's not always the case. And like preempting or thinking ahead of time, like, or going like a level deeper. It's like, I have this agenda item, I'm gonna ask this question. What is the answer? I can like type out my best guess, and then it saves a lot of time and it frames it. So I guess just being like very thoughtful in shaping conversations and like just being very like forthcoming and like thoughtful on that. That was hard. That was a good question. Yeah.
Just like curious what the like deployment roadmap looks like for and like where like the you guys come in terms of like you have a software platform, you don't just like sell it to them. So like, is it you guys building something like very specific for them, or I'm just like curious, like that seems like pretty unique. Like enterprise sales.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think neither of us are too involved in like the sales cycle all too much. Like I understand it for sure. Yeah, we built bespoke solutions to like each of your problems, and we work on like we call them impulse, but like a project basis, right? So it's not enough to just be like, I have this data, do something with it. We'd probably have someone like on the sales side scope about, like, okay, what's the problem? And like how can, and this isn't really stuff that we get exposure to much right now, but it's like, what's the problem? How can this data help us with the problem? Do you actually have this data? Is an important question because they may think they do, but maybe in reality they don't. So yeah, it won't just be like plug in your data to our platform. It's like centered around the problem.
Yeah. I actually disagree. I think that I have had experience with that because the customer that I'm working with is new, and so we've had to do that building from having nothing to like having something that's operational that they're using. I think we do have a lot of sales interaction there. It's kind of like what I was getting at earlier, where it's like working with the salespeople and kind of convince them that we are the right solution. And then once you have that, there's kind of a like scope of work of what they want you to fix, which again may not actually be what they need, but that's what they think they need. And then that's where we kind of get involved to like build out that thing. And so you are actually kind of involved with like what does the work that you're giving the customer look like? If that makes sense. Like you are gonna go to the hospital and be like, you need a new way to assign nurses or something, and then you build out for them. And so you're actually involved with a lot of that. Like they come to you with the data, they come to you with context. Basically, they don't necessarily come to you with a problem. And you have to like find what is the problem here and how do I solve it.
Yeah, I guess that was they'll come with us to the data, and then we collaborate with them to find out what the problems are.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So that's when we get involved. Does that answer your question?
So they come to you with data and like, they just know like something's wrong with your employee.
I don't know. That hasn't been my experience. Is that they'll come with like, this thing doesn't work, and then that's kind of where we start.
Yeah. Or a lot of times it's like a lot of the warp speed stuff. It's like they have a system in place, and then we will demo something to them and be like, we can do this 100 times better, and then they bring you on. So it's not necessarily that they will come to us with a problem. They might just be aware that their thing sucks, and we're like demoing something to them that will fix it, and then we kind of insert ourselves and like replace a lot of that.
And that's also assuming that sales are inbound, which I think, well, I won't
Sales
speak.
are inbound.
Seeing.
So let's assume you're the type of person who fits into Palantir. Like, what are some disadvantages of working at Palantir? Like, assuming you're the person who likes it, right? Like, is there still any limitations? Something that you don't not doing?
Great question.
You don't get to make day in the life TikToks because TikTok is banned on our phones. Disadvantages. I mean, if you're trying to do a 9 to 5, it isn't. There are people who do 9 to 5s, right? You can definitely make it work. I wouldn't say it's typical. More like a 9 to 7 on average, I guess, if that's like a detractor. Disadvantages. It's not easy. I think at the end of the day, my head hurts a lot from like all the decisions you have to make. Like it's very ambiguous, and like having to go from identifying problem, figuring out like what the next steps are, and then like taking those next steps. Like it is pretty exhausting most of the time. Like you don't just like each day you're going in and like I guess you don't really know what you're going to be doing that day. That's kind of hard.
Yeah, spontaneity is a big one. I don't know what my days are going to look like a lot of the time. Or, yeah, doing things that I don't know how to phrase this. Doing things where you can feel like you've accomplished it, and that's your day done. You've checked off this thing. You've sort of done this deliverable. You've done this presentation, and like it's behind you. That's not really what it's like, and so I think that that's also very difficult because it's like you've built something and no one's like, yay, like you've built this thing. It's like, okay, well this needs to be better. So I think a lot of times it's exhausting because I'm like, wait, but I stayed up until midnight for like the last week building this thing, and like the first thing is like this needs to be better in these 5 ways, which again is I think a lot like what being a founder is like, because it's like no one's gonna pat you on the back. This is like your thing and it needs to be better.
Yeah, I've gotten
So
like
that's difficult.
Zero positive feedback. And I don't think that's on me completely.
I think that's tough. And I also think that like figuring things out by yourself is very difficult. Like you don't really have a built-in, like you have mentors and stuff, but there isn't like a built-in structure of like, help, like I need to ask this person to like teach you how to do it. You really just sort of let loose on like all of the docs and previous stuff that people have done to figure it out yourself. So I feel like there's a lot of hours spent reading previous code, like figuring out by myself, which is something that I personally enjoy, but I think that for a lot of people that's difficult because you want to be able to like ask someone or like have someone to help you, have someone to train you. You don't get trained. You get, you are like onboarded and then immediately you have something that like customers are relying upon, like in day one. Sorry if you don't know how this thing works, like figure it out. So I think getting dropped into the deep end is also hard. So yeah, no, it's not easy. I had like a mental breakdown the other week. I was like, I'm terrible at my job. Like, why? But it's just you get up and you do it better, and so it's
Yeah, I would say at the sacrifice of like, I'm not gonna say, what is it, unlimited growth. You also have a very low floor, right? I think it ties into that.
Yeah. All the hyping up of like, you're not going to be stagnant is like great when we're sitting here giving this talk. And
Then we have to
like
do it.
Tuesday, and you're like, oh my god, like I just wanted to sit here and have it all day. You kind of regret that.
Yeah. Max? Oh, actually, sorry. You haven't asked a question yet.
So how's like the combination of the past 3 months affected your perspective on startups and being a founder? Like, has it affected the way you would, if you were to now start a startup, your approach to that?
Yeah, it definitely has. I'm gonna think about what specifically, but like immediately I'm just like, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have an answer while I think.
Yeah, I would say two things. I would say it has increased my confidence in myself that I can build something. I guess all of you have made things before, so maybe it's just me saying. But before you really make something, you're not entirely sure that you can do it, and so I think that that's huge. You've made something, and not only have you made something, you've made something that like people are using. Like by a part of being within this bigger company, you have made a product that has users. Whereas like maybe something that you built before like didn't have as many users as this thing you're making now, and so like getting to those cycles of like user feedback and like iteration and figuring out all that stuff is something that I definitely have more confidence in now. That if I like had a side project that no one was really using before and like, you didn't get to deployment and like having users and that kind of stuff, so I think confidence in that. I have another thing to say. Now I don't know what it was.
I can chip in well. I would definitely focus more on, we use the term winning a lot, like doing the things that it takes to win. It's kind of what Brian would refer to when he says like, don't do the things that don't scale. But like to the extreme, like I would like, I hear that from Brian. I was like, okay, like rather than having this be like an HTML form, I'll do a Google form. It's like, no, like you get on the phone with them and then enter their answers into an Excel sheet. Like really just do the scrappy stuff that you need to do to get off the ground. Being very extreme on that is a different way I would approach things. There are a lot of problems that we'll like encounter that it's like, oh, this is really simple, right? Like we just have to go from A to B. And even just because a problem sounds simple, its implementation isn't necessarily that case. I think it would just kind of change my perspective on like how I would qualify ideas to chase after. Really dig down into this. Okay, if I was to tackle this problem, how would I do it? Who are the kinds of people I would talk to? Honestly, what's going to block me? Like what's going to be the most annoying thing? I think I have greater perspective on how I would be able to identify those that I wasn't able to before.
Yeah, definitely like thinking about you have a product for sorry, but I think that is really important.
I mean, everything's centered around users,
Yeah,
right?
I think that you a lot of times if you're building in a bubble, you're like, I think this idea is so great, like why does no one else see that I've built this most amazing thing ever? And I think having that perspective and like getting to speak to people and really understanding how much it has to be like user driven. You can't just build this cool thing that you think is cool. You have to build something that's gonna like change a lot of people's lives or the way that they do things, like in a profound way. And like having that sense is important. I also think you're at a company, this is again a Palantir pitch, but I think you're exposed to a lot of really Palantir and were like, this is not how this should be working. And they, you know, not only did they find that, but they also had the ability to identify that this is something that like is worth their time to go and start and build. And so they went off and like started this company. I think you're exposed to so many things like that, where you're able to see this is a giant hole, and like Palantir may not be able to fix that hole, but like this is really important to me. And I think that I have so much more context over that, because people are coming to us with problems and things that are broken, or you're getting to like see inside of companies in a way that you may not as a student or just as a like regular person. You're able to see dysfunction kind of in that way.
Yeah, and related, because I think it's a good question that probably is useful. I also think something that I would focus on now that I maybe wouldn't have thought of, you know, a couple of months ago, is that do the thing that we refer to, or I used to say MVP a lot, just like get a minimum viable product out to something, but it isn't like viable, it's like valuable. Do the quickest thing that will be valuable for one specific person and have them be your evangelist, right? Because as soon as like you fix a problem for them or you unlock something for it, they're gonna tell other people and they'll do the work for you. It's not about like, oh, my website needs to have this, this, and that. It's like, no, like what can I do that's gonna take me the shortest amount of time to bring value to this person? I think that is a really big thing that I would change now about the way I like operate. Is there a time concern, AJ, or no? Okay, cool. Sweet.
Did that guy ever respond on YouTube?
Yeah, did Nathan follow up, Bobby? I think he was just trolling. Max.
Short question and then a long question. Short question is ChatGPT banned on your laptops?
Yes.
Banned, but we don't use it.
We cannot go to chatgpt.com.
Oh, really? We're trying.
I mean, I assume. We use something else.
Never tried.
That's good. Okay. Second question. You mentioned before the whole kind of identity around with Palantir, you build bespoke solutions off of your core product sets.
Yes.
Do you guys
Say it louder.
do you guys ever, or I mean, you've only been there for like 3 months, I don't know, like if you know the history or whatever, but like, does Palantir participate in any M&A, and how do you view that in conjunction with kind of the role of, hey, we're building these products out on a kind of contractual basis, versus like we're like almost a consultant contractor versus a, hey, we're going to acquire these solutions so that way we can eventually kind of pool them together into those parts.
Yeah.
So why don't we do M&A?
So do you or do you not?
I feel like that's kind of against our identity to do M&A, right?
Yeah, well, we don't do M&A, but I think, how do I say this without sounding like strong? I think that the reason we don't do M&A is because the way that we solve problems and the problems that we're solving are not ones that other companies are even like 5 miles from. You know, that's like such a like
Yeah.
good answer, but it's true. Like it's not like we go in there.
You're too good for that.
It's
Oh, no, and also, if you're building something bespoke, if you're doing a merger and acquisition, if you're acquiring something, if they gain traction or like got users, it probably wasn't bespoke, right? It was probably like generalized for some like larger problem set. So that wouldn't really fit into. And again, maybe we have M&As. I haven't looked in it, but it just like wouldn't make sense because that's like not how we try and do deals.
So then I guess as a follow-up to that, if that's the path that Palantir's on, why is Palantir at scale, like meaning at like big scale, not just McKinsey?
Maybe we're trying to be. No.
Because McKinsey doesn't. Sorry, not to hate on McKinsey.
Wait,
McKinsey doesn't actually do anything.
There we go.
Sorry. They just sort of tell you what you should be doing. You know, they're
What are
not
the other
providing.
consultants?
I think maybe if we were much better at sales, we could be McKinsey. But I think it maybe goes against the mission, right? Because McKinsey just tries to get deal flow for the sake of making money, but it's kind of, you know, it's like, oh, we're actually mission driven and whatnot. But like I think we're not trying to optimize deal flow. or at least I don't get that impression.
Yeah, that's kind of like the.
Don't let your shareholders know that.
That's kind of like the inverse thing that I was saying a little bit. Like we're not going out trying to find people who can benefit from Foundry. We're going out and trying to find people that have problems that we
Or like
can't solve.
institutions.
Yeah. And so I think it's almost backwards of M&A. Like we are building out little things that then become parts of our core product because it's clear that someone has asked for them. So instead of like a smaller company going in and being like, here's this problem, I have a startup that solves this problem, and now we're going to buy them. It's like we have insight into what the problem is. We're going to build some element of, and maybe it doesn't exist yet. Like maybe we don't have it at all, but we can build it because we have really smart people that like have spikes and all that kind of thing that like can build it, and then it'll become a part of our core product as if it had always been there. So it's like we do like internal M&A, if that makes sense, where it's like people will start working on some side project that then eventually becomes like a full part of what we're doing because they can see that like that needs to be done.
So no, we're not going to acquire you.
Yeah.
I can change you. You want a brokerage license? Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, another
I
one.
was gonna kind of build off of that question because you brought up, McKinsey and the difference between, what you're doing at Palantir and consulting. Zach, I know you personally worked in consulting as a technical consultant.
Yes.
With EY.
Yes.
So, when you think about the approaches to these problems that you're facing, I imagine like the problems that your clients come to you with, or that you see clients with, aren't that functionally different between what you faced with McKinsey as a consultant versus what you're facing with Palantir here.
Yeah.
So, is it just the aspect of you building that's different, or is it really the whole culture around it that's been that different?
Probably both. Like there is, I forget the word for it, like integrated consulting or something like that, where like it's Bain or McKinsey, but they like deliver a product at the end of the day. But yeah, like it still wouldn't be the same because they don't have like the attitude or the culture. Like maybe they don't go to the client's like physical location as much as we do. Nor do they have Foundry, I think is the biggest thing, is they just don't have that, so they're inherently just going to be like a lot slower to be able to solve it. But problem space, yeah, probably pretty similar to like traditional consulting. Like consultants solve problems. They just solve it with like a PowerPoint rather than like solving it most of the time.
I've never worked in consulting, so I don't know that I have any special insight. I've always been like an engineer. But yeah, I think that given circumstances where we have beaten out consulting, like firms when they're trying to win the same contract, the difference is the scale and the speed. People are always so blown away by like how fast we do things, and to me, I'm like, this is just how long it should take. Like I don't understand why it would take a year to do this, for anyone, because like that makes them more money. But like the thing that drives us is the
Solving the problem.
yes, we're indexing on solving the problem. We're not indexing on getting the contract. We're not indexing on like any of that kind of stuff. And so I think that like for us, it's just a different timeline, and like a different. And it's the other thing I would say is that, well, I don't know. I'm making a gross generalization. I think that consultants solve the problem they're asked to solve, and I think that like from everything that we've been saying, like that's not what we do. I don't know if that's true.
I mean, I don't know either. Like I just interned for EY one summer.
From my understanding, people bring in consultants because they have identified a known problem and they're like, hey, this manufacturing process is wrong. We're losing money on this thing. Please solve it. Consultants will go and spend a lot of time and like tell you what you need to do to solve that one problem. They won't tell you how to make your entire organization different so that you won't have problems in the future. Which is like kind of what we do, and like a lot of what we do on the government side is like they'll come to us and say this thing is broken, and like it's our job to kind of be like, we'll actually need to be doing everything differently. And so you have the license to like go that step further, whereas in consulting you just kind of yeah.
But how do you go about convincing people that they have all of these other issues that maybe they're unaware of?
Great question. It's a lot of.
It'd be great if we knew the answer all the time.
skill
Yeah.
Customer management, and I think that's like, I mean, maybe I'm like speaking to that a lot because like that's what I'm doing right now with my clients. Like it's fresh in my mind. But yes, a lot of communication. Like, how do you tell someone that their entire process is terrible without saying that? And like how do you break it? How do you propose it to them in a way that makes them seem like they came up with it? Like all of those skills where it's like, how do you do that in a way where people are going to want to adopt the thing that you've made? It's very difficult. Like I'm not going to say that I'm the world's expert.
That's really hard.
But it's something that like I feel like I'm actively building that skill and commercial company is doing it to like improve their bottom line, which like is good for them, but you know maybe not good for anyone else. Whereas the government, it's like you're changing a process that you can then see like active change being made that's like helping people, and so it's really easy to like come into work and feel like you're to not like lose that spark to do that, if that makes sense. Yeah.
But if you're like coming into an industry that you don't have a lot of context for
Mhm.
compared to them, how are you even beginning to identify these weaknesses that they, for some reason, have not been able to identify? And then you were also confident that you were accurately and correctly identifying these things? Like, where's that difference coming from?
Yeah, I think like looping back to when I was talking about that guy who like had his mind blown that you can upload a PDF. It's like you get so locked into what you can do within like these walls, right? That you, and I don't think this is unique to Palantir whatsoever about like having an outsider perspective, you know, open up what your possibilities are like that. A lot of places can say that, but like it is true, right? When you bring into someone who kind of comes with no assumptions, which is what we're doing, it unlocks that.
Yeah, I'm gonna give another like Sean pitch, like kind of a recruiting pitch, but a lot of the Palantir philosophy on recruiting is to recruit people right out of college because they haven't had the chance to get entrenched in kind of the way that things work. And so like an industry hire is great and all because they have a lot of experience, but we would actually rather have people who are just really smart and out of college and no one has like molded them and kind of told them to believe that this is the way things work. And so it's like a lot of the recruiting stuff we do, you just go find smart people. It doesn't matter like what their expertise is in, because if you know, it's very easy to learn things and like your mind is very adaptable. It's actually way more like harmful and difficult to try and undo that in your brain. And so like I agree. I'm 22 years old. What do I know about financial systems? What do I know about government systems? Like probably nothing. But I would also say that I'm naive enough to not be like it has to be that way. I'm like, why? There's no reason why it has to be this way. Just because you built it that way.
Very
You know?
true.
Yeah. And so I think that yeah, that sort of disruptive mindset. And I would also say that have a lot more self-confidence in yourself because you would be so surprised about like people who really don't know what they're talking about in like big CEO positions or like managerial positions and head whatever. And so being able to come in and have a perspective and take a stand and like say it and be able to, me as a 22-year-old person who knows nothing about financial systems, to be able to like go to the client and be like, it should be this way and have everyone listen to me is I think another thing that's kind of really unique about Palantir and really startup-y is that like I could pitch something to the CEO tomorrow and he'd be like, that's a great idea, do it. And there's nothing stopping me from doing that. There's no, I don't have to go through channels, I don't have to do any of that stuff. Like there's very few people standing in my way to do whatever I think is right. And I think everyone from the first day, so I said like there's no ramp up process. From day one you're expected to like have opinions and have conviction in your opinions, which is something that's difficult for me. So I'm like, I don't know. But they're like, no, take a stand. Like you have some knowledge, you're smart, we hired you. Take a stand. And then like if you're wrong, you're wrong. And you learn. But like I think that is another really important skill. It's like similar as you said to like startup vibe, where it's like you're standing in front of all these people being like, no, it should be done this way, it should be done the way that I have done. And like I firmly believe that.
And also on that, I guess this is slightly unrelated, but a personal example is like I have a friend who is running this fintech startup based out of Chicago. He's doing really well. He's like landing a couple enterprise deals now, and I see parallels because when he's signing like an enterprise deal with a company, right? It's top down, right? We've signed this deal. You have this new offering, and you can use it. And like it's someone high up who's signing it, and then like people down the hierarchy chain are the ones who are actually using it. But then you have the problem of convincing those people to use it, right? I remember I was talking with him when I was in Chicago last time about that's a really hard problem, right? It's like just because like your manager or like your manager's manager says that you can do this now, you gotta get traction. Like just inking, putting ink on that paper doesn't mean you're gonna get user adoption right away. So that's a problem that he has been struggling with, and like that's a problem that we get to try and tackle each day, which is quite cool. And I think that's also a valuable experience to be having.
Yeah, I think it's very important to work at a company where you feel like you can have an opinion and people will listen to you regardless of how much time you've been at the company. I'm like, this may be one of the main reasons I'm working here is like someone like I feel like needs to be in a position where people are going to give me respect regardless of, whether I'm a girl or whether I've been here for 2 weeks and, whatever degree. I don't have a PhD.
personal point.
inspirational
Yeah.
points, but yeah.
God.
Your guys' opinion, what makes like a truly great forward deployed engineer? And I'm kind of like getting at this at the angle of like the balance between talking to people and like empathizing with the customer and like the engineering skill set. I get like this when I try and answer this question, I think like if someone's working in like financial systems or like government, they probably have like very deep understanding like of how it works, like completely non-technically. And then just on the technical side, they'd be very curious about like I don't know, new language models, like how to work with new technology and like constantly updating code of these things, which is like in a perfect world probably you don't have time to do all that. So I guess what have you guys seen so far? Like who's like you think about the best forward?
Yeah. I would almost reject that question because, like, again, I'm not trying to convince you to work here. Like, I want whatever I say to be relevant to whatever you're trying to chase after. I can maybe say like, what are some of the desirable traits that people there have that I think are like broad and useful, like being scrappy, moving fast on things, like I guess not being afraid to ask questions and like just going into things head first. Like I think those are qualities I've noticed of like the people I admire there, and like I think those are just good qualities for like everyone to have in our position maybe. I don't know. We've been going on for 80 minutes. I have like a little timer up here on my thing. So
People have questions.
yeah, I know. Like there really is no time constraint.
Yeah, we can start at 7.
Yeah. I think that makes more sense.
Let's just do that. If people have leftover questions, you guys can just talk to Zach. You guys can
Yeah, again, the Q&A like dragged to be again pretty specific to like the work that we're doing, which makes sense because I bet you guys are curious. But I really and I think I've been like hammering this down is like it does not have to be here because I mean we can't even hire everyone in this room if we wanted to. But I think that we have some kind of valuable insights which would probably change our perspective on the way that like we would build products if we were put out there in the world again, and just kind of want to use this as a time to share. That being said, I am working for like the automotive industry with like OEMs and tier 1 suppliers, doing a lot of stuff on that. We are expanding a lot as well. So the reason that they're able to send me down is we're trying to get people onto that team specifically. If you are a graduating senior, we would probably need you to do a co-op next semester. If you're graduating in December, hey Brandon, that is perfect. Please let's talk. And then if you want to do like an internship or a co-op as well, up there. Otherwise, you can always apply for just like, if you're under the regular graduation timeline, you can just apply. If you wanted to do like, a new grad position, I just don't think the timing will be as good or like your odds will be as good.
On the sales pitch, I would just say there are people at Palantir who do not embody that sort of founder mentality. Everything we've been saying, I think, is because we are two people, not to hype myself up, but you are, and I would like to think that I am. There are two people that like have that startup mentality, and so like that's why everything we've been saying like seems to fit into that mold. But there are so many people who just don't and just go about their everyday business. And I think inversely, there are so many people probably at Apple that like have that founder mentality, and there's so many. So I think it's really all about you and what you choose to prioritize. And I think that it's very important when you go into your career. It's very like you just start doing what you're asked. It's very important to like step back and see like, am I getting out of this what I want? Which is kind of what I was getting at before. Like, how do I navigate where I am in this company to be serving what I want? Like, if I know I want to do side with the medical AI startup when I, leave this company, how can I make sure that all of the experiences that I'm having here are like serving that goal? I think it's very easy to get lost and to like just do what is asked of you and not do that. And so that would be my one like final advice. And just making sure that you have that North Star for yourself is important, no matter what company you end up working for, if at all.
And gamma rays.
Yes, gamma rays. Do the hard thing. It will pay off.
Sweet. Thank you. I'll stick around Shell probably for like an hour, 30 minutes. So like definitely have time for people to come and talk. I don't know what your
Yeah,
timelines.
if you have any questions. Thanks for letting me just talk. I don't know why I do it, but like, thanks for listening.
Again, commercial, U.S. government. I don't know if you have anything specific to commercial, come to me, U.S. government, but we can answer basically any questions. Thanks for having us. Good to be back.
It's good to have you.